What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're looking at another tier list for Forza Motorsport. This time we're going to be looking at the touring car division. Now this is the other permanent playlist and featured multiplayer alongside the GT cars. Now, I did a tier list for those as well, so if you want to see that, I'll drop a link down in the description. But I'm going to do the same thing as I did there. We're going to take a look at all these cars, go in alphabetical order, look at their strengths and weaknesses, and then place them into one of these tiers you see here on the screen. Now, there are a lot more cars in the GT category, and they're a lot more spread out in terms of performance. So these cars, while there's only 9 of them versus 20 in GT, they're a lot closer on performance, so it should be really interesting to look at all these and see where they stack up. But before we get started, if you haven't already, please drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel. But without further ado, let's get started. So first up, we have the Audi RS3. Now, this car is just great all around. It's pretty much good at everything. It's really good in the corners, probably one of the best in the class. It has pretty good top end. Acceleration is good. Launch is good. Tire wear is a non-issue for most of these cars with how the races are set up in multiplayer right now. So the Audi, it's very easy to put in the strong category here. You could even argue that on some tracks like Maple Valley or even Spa, you could maybe venture into the OP category. But for all the track lists that they have us running right now, for how they rotate in multiplayer, I think it's better to just put it in the strong category. A very strong pick right now, but not quite OP. Next up, we have the Ford Focus. This is a bit of an underdog, and I'm not sure why, but not a lot of people like to run this car in multiplayer. Even though it handles very nicely, it's pretty easy to set up and get going right out of the box. It does have one weakness in that it is lower on power than the rest of these cars. It's around 330 horsepower versus about 350 for the others. So that is its one glaring weakness, but it is pretty good across the board elsewhere. Its mid-corner speed is pretty good mechanical grip. Again, tire wear is not a problem. Gets off the line pretty well. So while it's definitely not Audi tier, I think it's pretty safe to put it in the decent category. Next up, we have the Honda Civic. Now, this car has a bit more power than the Focus, but it does have a bit less mechanical grip, so they kind of balance each other out, which makes it fun to race these cars against each other. But I think the Honda can just about keep up with the Focus in the corners, and because it's a bit better on the straights, it does go into the decent category as well, but it will be ahead of the Focus. It's just that little bit better. Next up, we have the Hyundai Veloster. Now, this car caught me by surprise because it's one of the lowest PI cars in the division. It's one of the only A-class cars where most of them are all low S. Yet, it's one of the better cars to pick. It's pretty good on lap times. It does understeer a little bit, but its saving grace is its top end. It's really, really good on top end. So much so that on longer straights, you can definitely make some passes happen. And if you're matching people in the corners, they're basically at your mercy on the straights. And if you're battling for position with someone behind you, you can pretty easily keep them behind, which is an advantage that not all of these cars have. So given that it's about the same or better than a lot of these cars on a lap, and it has a bit of a straight line advantage, I think it needs to go in the decent category ahead of both of the other cars we put there so far. Next up, we have the Lynk. This car, if you didn't know already, is very, very strong. It's easily the third best car in the category. It doesn't really have any weaknesses either. It's quite similar to the Audi in that it has very good cornering speed and mechanical grip. It just doesn't quite have the top end that it needs to be truly top tier, but everything else about it is very good, and it's very, very close to the Audi on shorter tracks. Just doesn't quite have what it takes to hang with it on the longer tracks though. It's definitely better than the other 3 cars in the decent category though, so it does have to go a tier above into the strong category. Next up, we have the Mercedes. Now this car, the more I drove it, the more I enjoyed it, and the more lap time I got out of it. This car, if you spend some time with it, is very, very rewarding, and it is actually quite fast on a lap. It's another one of those cars that's decent all around. It does wear through its tires a bit more than the other cars, but with how long the races are in multiplayer right now, it doesn't really play a factor in how your races go. So it is something to keep in mind, but it doesn't really matter right now. So It's about on par with the other cars in that regard. It does have really good mechanical grip and minimum cornering speed, though. It kind of feels like a light version of the Audi, if you will. It's decent at everything, just not quite at that top level. But it is very strong in a race. It can turn some very good laps, especially when at the front of the pack. So I'm going to place it at the top of the decent category, right in front of the Veloster. You could argue that these two might be flip-flopped, but for me, the Mercedes was just that little bit better with all things considered. Next, we have the black sheep of the family, which is the Subaru Levorg. Now, this is the only rear-wheel drive car in the entire class, which makes it a bit unique, and with that uniqueness comes some unique strengths and weaknesses. So for one, the car, even though it has a high amount of horsepower on paper, it's not that fast on the straights. And while it does get off the line a bit better than the front-wheel drive cars, it does get swallowed up very quickly into turn one, so that's just something to keep in mind with this car. Another thing to keep in mind is that it requires some setup work, and it takes a bit more skill to be quick in this car, so it may not be a friendly beginner choice, namely because it's rear-wheel drive, and it's inherently more difficult to go quick in those cars, but it is an interesting choice because of that. But on the topic of rear-wheel drive, that's this car's entire gimmick. Because it's rear-wheel drive, it does not chew up the front tires nearly as much as the other cars do, and that can result in some very interesting race strategies as far as tire choice goes. So most races will either be like a medium no stop, or the longer ones will be like a medium one stop. This car can potentially go on softs where the other cars have to go on mediums, and that can really level the playing field for this car. You still have to make up for it in the corners and drive to that potential, but the potential is there. And there are even some races like the Suzuka East race where it's a medium no-stop race, where the last lap is a huge struggle for most of the cars, but the Subaru just drives right through it like there's nothing wrong. So it can gain a few seconds on that last lap, which on that short of a track can usually make up the difference in pace. So tracks like that, tracks like Le Mans where you can do a hard no stop, much easier than the other cars. I think that's the strategy that every car should do there anyway, but with the Levorg you can just sit in the slipstream the whole race, and then when the Porsche curves come up on the last lap, you have way better front tires than everybody else, and you just drive around them and cruise to a free win. So there are some niche tracks like that where the Subaru can really clutch up and get some free wins, but on most tracks, you have to have a softer tire compound just to break even, which is the inherent flaw in this car. So if you have to break even or the tire strategy doesn't change for this car, it's actually quite weak. But because there are a couple niche tracks where it's very good, it still belongs in the decent category overall, so I'm going to place it right in front of the Focus. Next up, we had the Vauxhall Astra. When I first drove this car, I thought it felt really fast. It does rotate quite well in the corners, and it's a very nimble feeling car. So if you like feeling like you're going fast, then this is a good car. But unfortunately, it's just middle of the road at everything, just like a lot of these cars, but even a tiny bit behind in some regards. It's not stellar on the straights. Even though it feels fast in the corners, it's very similar speed-wise in the corner than a lot of these cars, compared to a lot of these cars. It doesn't really have any super redeeming qualities. It's just another option to choose from. But it feels like you have to work a bit harder to get to the same pace as the other cars. So I guess I'm going to have to put this at the bottom of the decent category. And notice, it's not in the weaker category. It's not a bad car at all. All of these cars in decent are that. They're decent. They're all very, very close to each other, and it's honestly a crapshoot with which car is going to win a race. If they're all drivers at a similar skill level, driving these cars, it's anybody's guess as to which car is going to win, which is great about this division. Like you have so many options to have competitive racing, and I think that's why people enjoy it so much. But one thing people don't enjoy is when they have to race against this last car on the list, the Volkswagen Golf, because this thing is just, I don't even know what to say. It's absurdly overpowered. I don't know what Turn 10 was thinking when they balanced this thing. It's just absolutely silly. It's an OP without question. It accelerates like mad. You get 3 free positions off the start. You gain
at least a car length or two on every straight. Any acceleration-based track, it's just so far clear of anything else. It's absurd. And even on handling-based tracks, it'll still be as fast as... It'll be faster than the Lynk and just as fast as the Audi. And anything with a bit of straight line reliance is just... It's game over with this car. Like, if you drive this thing... I don't know how you enjoy it. You must enjoy well-done steak with ketchup, too. But... yeah, there's not much more to say about this car because it's just utterly broken. Hopefully they nerf it, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. So if you do beat these cars, if you beat the Golf in a race, you should feel pretty good about yourself. But that's about all I have to say about the touring cars. I think this is a pretty solid list. And we do have one more car coming in the car pass in the next couple weeks. So I may update this. I don't know if I'll make a full video on it. I might just do a small channel update in the community tab or something and just show where it goes on the list. Because I don't know if a whole new video is worth it for one car. But there are 2 new GT cars coming. The AMG GT3 and the 720S. So between those 2 cars and the tweaks I want to make to the GT tier list, I think that's worth a new video. So make sure you stick around for that. But until then, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you did, throw a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That's all I've got for this one, so I'll see you next time. Thanks.